Hello Gobs, and welcome to the next episode of my Final Fantasy series. If you're not a Gob, become subscribed and become a Gob today. I upload both video game RPG content and tabletop RPG content. I talk about, I review them, and I even play them on the channel. So if that interests you, subscribe. Like I said, you become a Gob, you can run around in a Goblin Cave. Now, if this is your first episode that you're watching, or if this is the first time you're seeing the series, I'm playing all the main entries to the Final Fantasy series, 1 through 16, skipping 11 and 14. They will get their own episode, okay? Don't worry about it. It's just not going to be an in-depth review like all the episodes I'm doing now. So for each Final Fantasy game, I am playing them and then I am reviewing them, and that's mostly what the series is. At the end of the series, I'll do one big video where I compare everything. Final boss battles, boss music. We're going to compare everything. Story, which one was the most fun, just everything about them. That's what's going to happen at the end of this series. So this series is called Final Fantasy's Gob Adventure. That's what I'm going with. We're 4 episodes in. No one's told me any better, so this is what we're going to go with. Now, I did originally record this, but it turns out I had a lot to say. So I'm going to try to cut this intro short. We're going to get right into how I break down my review system, because it's a bit weird, and I know it's going to cause some confusion, so I'm going to go ahead and break it down real quick. First, we have different sections. Each section has a chance to get 1 or more gold coins, and then after each section, I go into merits or demerits. I haven't done one in a while, but nothing's particularly stood out about these games, and they kind of just meld into the final thoughts and final ratings. So a game can earn up to 5 gold coins, which is bare minimum. It just means it's an okay game and there was nothing too wrong about it. I'm trying to aim for more than 5 gold coins. I'm trying to get above 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5 means it's a pretty standard game. There's nothing heinous about it, and there's nothing super exciting that sets it apart from other games. It might get below. It doesn't mean it's an awful game. It was just that there was like themes or mechanics that just made overall playing the game suck. With that being said, I usually give an opinionated content warning. So if there's something that you like that I hated or said was bad, then that's perfectly okay. It's just my silly little opinion, and tell me in the comments why you like it, and I'll be happy to discuss with you or read about it. I love reading comments. I always say that. If there's something that I like that you dislike, then let me know. So that's the little warning. Okay, just a water warning before we go into this. Then I have my spoiler. Definitely for this game, there is a big spoiler warning. I tend to want to keep these reviews kind of spoiler light-ish, trying not to go into too many twists and spoilers. But for this one, this Final Fantasy, oh yeah, I'm going into this story. You could probably tell by the title, but I am not impressed with this entry. It baffles me that it even got a direct sequel. But with that being said, that's your spoiler warning. You'll see what I get to the review system. Usually I break it down way more, but I feel like that's getting repetitive, so I'm just going to skip it. You'll understand when I start getting into the actual review. So with all that intro out of the way, let's get into episode 4 of Final Fantasy Gob's Adventure. Before I go anywhere, I gotta get out of this dank cave. Gobby, beam me up. See, get it? I'm in an airship now. I did the whole flash of light thing, and now I'm on the airship. I hope you guys enjoyed this change of scenery, but this is what everything's going to look out from now on. So, we're in the Gobvincible. Definitely not a reference to Final Fantasy 3 or anything. But while we're here, let's talk about the next whatever I was talking about, because I forgot to say this during the video. This is an afterthought. But whatever. Enjoy the video. Keep watching, or I'll crash this ship into your house. Don't think I will? Yeah, you're probably right. This costs a lot of Goblin King gold. Okay, I'm going to let you get back to the video now. I said, I'm going to let you get back to the video now. Now, with all the previous ones and the next 2, I am playing the Pixel Remaster of these Final Fantasy. So today, I will be reviewing Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster. Now, here's just a bit of short information behind the game and all that. I'm not going to sit here and read a Wikipedia article to you, so if you want more, I would suggest go looking up more. Just know that this was developed and published by Square. It's still called Square. It'll be called Square for a while. It was also known as Squaresoft and the rest. Final Fantasy IV was developed in 1991, 1 year after Final Fantasy III. It will also be the first one to be released on the Super Famicom, because the others were released on the Famicom in Japan. Now, a little bit interesting is this one was known as Final Fantasy II. So if you go and watch my Final Fantasy II episode, you'll notice I put in a Super Nintendo cover, and that's not correct, because they released Final Fantasy I as 1 in America, they released Final Fantasy IV as 2 in America, and then they released Final Fantasy VI as 3 in America to avoid confusion with international releases. Obviously, later on with other releases, other Western releases, they would go on to fix this and correct the order of the games, but that's just a little interesting thing and a little mess up. You can go and watch the second episode to see. But once again, Hironobu Sakaguchi is back to direct. The music is also, once again, being composed by Nobuo Uematsu. And just for a heads up about Final Fantasy, if you didn't know, Final Fantasy is a high fantasy, technically kind of like a techno fantasy, because there's a lot of like steamworks and machines involved, but regardless, it is a fantasy adventure JRPG. With all that out of the way, let's get into today's sections, because I got a lot to talk about. Let's start out with our first section, which is graphics, visuals, and animations. Now, with it being released on the Super Famicom, since the Pixel Remaster does try to capture the original game as close as possible, it's not going to capture the graphics, obviously, to T, but everything else is based on the original Famicom versions for 1 through 6. If 5 and 6 are released. I haven't played on them yet, I haven't looked them up, so I don't know what they're on. But with it being released on the Super Famicom, you can kind of see an upgrade in the quality of the dungeons. Not the world map. The world map technically looks the same, but whenever you're in dungeons, there's a lot more open areas. So previously, dungeons would be like rows and columns with some crossroads and open sections. Here, we start to see a lot more open areas. I mean, look at this beginning of this cave. You can just like walk everywhere. It's not just rows and columns, like I said in previous games. So that was really nice to see. Also, with Final Fantasy IV, we see a return to customized characters as opposed to 1 and 3. We start to see, like in Final Fantasy II, actual specialized characters. And these characters each have portraits, and I thoroughly enjoy each portrait. I mean, we got this little gremlin here, we got this smug a-hole here, and then we have the main character who starts out like this, but eventually becomes this, and I think that's a really nice touch. I really enjoy character portraits. Not that the little mini characters are bad from Final Fantasy 1 and 3, but the portraits really help you facilitate in your head what these characters are supposed to look like. Enemies, well, a lot of them are designed nicely. As far as animation, some of them float up and down if they're flying or if they're affected by the float spell, and when you fight bosses, they switch between different phases. I mean, you'll see the bosses, but they do this animation where they switch between the thing. And I gotta say, some of the enemy designs are really cool and downright horrid. I mean, look at this thing. Look at this. This is supposed to be an antlion. I don't know if you ever seen a picture of an antlion. I mean, they can be pretty horrifying, so I guess the game captures it well. But then we have the final boss. I mean, here's your spoiler if you're wondering what the final boss looks like. But I can't make heads or tails of this design. It's a personification of BS. That's what it is. I can't tell. It looks like a gigantic spaceship. But anyways, aside from all of that, I think the enemies are designed nice. And with these battle scenes and animations, we start to see like narrative battles where you're not in control, but two characters will just fight with a predetermined outcome. That's pretty fun to watch sometimes, and other times it's just annoying. You could just like do what they usually do and just have the sprites attack each other outside of the battle, but I kind of get it. It makes it more narrative. It feels more like cutscenes as with the previous ones. There's still just pretty standard cutscenes. I did play 5 and I was really caught off guard by the opening of that, but I'll get to that when I get to 5. But here, you know, we have more cutscenes than the previous ones. I'm trying not to compare it to the previous ones as much, but it's really hard when you're playing them in order. I think the map design looks nice overall, especially in the underworld where everything is, well, it looks like an underworld, and then when you go to the moon, it looks like a moon. So for what it is, the map design is fairly nice. Now that I'm talking about the Pixel Remaster, I always talk about the magic effects. They tend to carry the same magic effects between the games, but here they kind of updated them a little bit. Like when you cast Cure, there's this little special effect, and since aside from that, the magic effects are the same overall, although we do get new summoning animations because summons are back, so those were fun to watch. I think they're new anyways. At least the summons have different designs, so overall the summons look pretty nice. There's more unique animations or sprites, such as using various commands. I mean, again, look at this stupid little gremlin. How can you how can you hate this? These animations are fun, but for the most part I like seeing unique, because compared to the previous one, not Final Fantasy 3 but 1 and 2, every NPC and character sort of had the same animations. Now each of the commands have separate animations, and I'm just glad that they decided to include it. They could have just left it stock, but they made it unique to each person. Now, I might sound like I'm talking about it more, but usually graphics, visuals, and animations aren't going to be anything spectacular to me. If a game's fun, a game's fun. The graphics aren't going to play a big portion into that. Due to the upgraded portions and just having a large variety of animations compared to the older games, it's not really worth a point, but I hope each game going forward adds more unique animations and even more cutscenes. I'm waiting for some bombastic cutscenes to show up. I want to see something like spectacular. So overall, for graphics, visuals, and animations, Final Fantasy IV gets a gold coin. Moving on to our next section, which is usually our biggest section, but today it's not. So I will try to keep it light. But our next section is gameplay and mechanics. Keep in mind, I've gone over the Pixel Remaster features extensively in my previous episodes, so today we're going to just kind of skip over it because they didn't really impact the game here. Just know that there's auto battle, a mini map, and a big map feature. Also, in-game items related to the maps. Since this is a Pixel Remaster, you can just click a button and pull up the map, while previously you had to use items or spells to bring up the map. And once again, autosave is great here. With this game being slightly more difficult or just BS in general, I'm really glad there's autosave. I would hate to have to start over from like halfway in the dungeon because they have save points now, but I'll get onto that later. But I really did enjoy autosave. Like I said in the previous one, I am so grateful that we have autosave because now I don't have to run through the entire dungeon. Final Fantasy IV has two major changes. I mean, there's a bunch of minor ones that I'm not going to go over, but the two major ones that separate it from previous entries are, first of all, you don't start the game with naming your characters. You can still name them, like you have to find a character in the game and you can name them, but with having unique names, they also have unchangeable jobs. This means you don't select what jobs each character is going to have, obviously. But in the previous games, you had been able to have some customizability on what you want each character to be. Here, they are what the game hands them to you. Luckily, they do swap out your team pretty often, so you have new jobs coming in, you have old jobs leaving, and if there's a section that seems downright horrid, usually you just have to get past that section and those characters will leave, and new characters will join with usually better jobs sometimes. Just know that there's no interchangeable jobs, so you kind of lose customizability. There's not even magic shops to go and buy spells from, because in the previous games you had to go and manually assign spells to each of your characters. Here they just learn whatever whenever they level up, and aside from that they don't really gain new abilities as they level up, so really you just don't have any hand in whatever the characters can be. You can change their equipment, but again, each class that they are have set equipment that you can't change from, and that kind of ruins the fun of designing your own team or your own strategy. You don't get to play your way, you have to play with what the game hands you, and you can still kind of play your way, but for the most part you just have no hand on what they do. Now, like I said, with unchangeable jobs, and since they learn spells as they level up and they don't really learn commands as they level up, there is one thing, and that is Cecile becomes a dark blade to a paladin, and he's the only one in the game that experiences a job change. And his style kind of changes completely, but not really, because he becomes a paladin who can learn white spells, but those spells really don't do anything because he doesn't have a lot of spirit. He's basically just a really tanky martial character. And then there's Rydia, but she just loses white spells and becomes the prominent black mage slash summoner. So there's that. You get at least some type of change, but again, like overall I keep saying, you just don't have any control, and it kind of just ruins the fun. At least for me, it kind of ruins the fun. Not that there's any problem with having set roles for the characters, I just prefer to have more customized abilities to my characters in the game. The second largest notable feature that sets it apart is the introduction of active time battle, which you can change between wait, which stops time when you're selecting items or magic, or active, which keeps the battle going even if you're in those magic menus panicking to select which spell you want to use or item to use. Now I thought I had set it to active. Turns out I set it to wait. I didn't know that until like the final boss. So throughout the entire game I was panicking clicking my items and it would mess me up at times. But I didn't know the game automatically starts out on wait. For Final Fantasy V, I did set it to active. Because with active time battle, all games going forward until 10 are in active time battle. Which means players have these bars that fill up. And once that bar fills up, then you can select an action for that character. And then that would kind of like cue it. Because sometimes they don't use it immediately. Such as charging a spell or charging a certain attack. And you can also just decide that you don't want them to act right now. And you can just have them pass their turn. Basically, they keep the bar full so you can keep their actions. That's essentially what the entirety of active time battle is. It can kind of suck, but I really like active time battle because it puts pressure on you. But if you forgot, because I've been playing these in order, so 1 through 3 aren't active, and this one's active, and sometimes I'd like input my actions and wait for the team, and here I would input my actions, and then it was like, oh yeah, I'm in active time battle. They're just gonna keep going, because when you're not in the menu or anything, enemies will continually to keep attack you, even if your characters are waiting to take their turns. Not to mention that you have to usually control at least 5 different characters, where in previous games you have 4, and then in like games in like 7 and 8 you only have 3 for active time battle. Here you have to control 5 different characters. Whenever they start to get their commands lined up, it can be really hectic switching between them, especially if they have similar looking commands, such as when you have 3 spellcasters. But that's just a skill issue on my part. Overall, I really like active time battle. I talked about this earlier, but characters do leave and join, which was one of the more worst things about Final Fantasy II. But here, when characters leave, they leave all their equipment, and when they join back, they have new equipment with them, or at least average or good equipment with them, but they are around the same level as the party. So in Final Fantasy II, you kind of had this problem where the characters that joined you had no spells or weapon levels. They had some, but for the most part they were a blank slate, and you kind of didn't want to dump any resources into them. Here, with set jobs, you kind of don't have to worry about that. So if there's anything good about set jobs, at least you don't have to worry about spell levels or weapon levels. Now, talking about these set jobs, each character has unique commands. I'm not going to go over them like I did in the Final Fantasy III episode, but once again, I didn't know what some of them did, and others were just quite useless, such as Edward's ability to run, or Tella's recall ability. And crying? I mean, what does this mean, and why does it fluster the enemy? Is it a slow, a stop? Do I target my team? What does crying do? And Edward's run ability. Anytime you have Edward in your team, there's never been a thing like, oh, maybe if he runs away, he can come back and save everybody. But no, that never happens. And then Tella's recall ability lets him cast a random spell for 15 mana. Sometimes it's a strong spell, but usually it's not. And sometimes you just cast thunder or fire or a basic spell. You spend 15, those spells cost 5 points. So it's kind of just a big waste. And sometimes he casts Toad on boss enemies that can't be turned into toads. So it's really just a wasted turn. And then even more, you can just spend the points and then he won't cast anything at all because he forgot. Overall, most of the commands are fine, and sometimes they tell you what they do. For example, whenever you focus with Yang, it says double the attack powers. So sometimes they tell you what they do, and then sometimes they don't. I mean, game, you kind of just give us like a menu in the options somewhere. Maybe there is one and I just missed it, but for the most part, I wish they told you what each command specifically did, so I know I'm not wasting a turn whenever I'm selecting that command. Once again, Formation is back. Formation was good in Final Fantasy III and not really in 2. 1 didn't have any, but here, Formation is completely different, because in the previous ones, you got to select individually where each character goes. Here, you can only have 3 in the front, or 2 in the back, or alternatively 2 in the front and 3 in the back. Now the same thing's here. If they're in the back, they do less damage, but they take less damage. In the front, they do full damage, but take more damage. And that's about the basic of it. But certain parts of the games, you'll have like 1 marshal and 2 spellcasters, so you can put them 1 in the front, 2 in the back. Sometimes you might have like 3 spellcasters and 2 marshals, so then you could swap them, so there's 2 marshals are in the front and the 3 spellcasters are in the back. And with this, you have the row command coming back. I didn't even know there was a row command because I was a big dumb and wasn't reading some of the tutorial people that you can go and talk to. I didn't know you had to click the opposite direction of all the other commands. Normally you have your first page, your second page, and it would be in the second page with defend. Here you have to go forward and it's by itself with no other commands, and compared to 2 and 3 where you had to manually select the command to have them switch between front or back for each character, here you can just select one character and this swaps everybody. So if you're ever into a back attack, which are back, so you get it, back attacks are back. Your fastest character that goes first, you can just have them use the row command and switch everybody. So that was fairly nice. Pig is now a new condition. I'm not sure what it does. I think it's just they keep their physical attack, but they can't do any commands. Whereas Mini, they lose their physical attack, but they can still cast spells. Where Frog, you can't do anything except cast Usana or Toad on yourself. I think you can cast Usana. I know you can cast Toad, but there are annoying conditions back alongside those. Those are fairly annoying in battle, but you can usually undo them with an item. Poison is back, but there's barely enemies that cause poison. The most annoying condition that doesn't last outside of battle is paralyzation. Sure, transformation and sleep are bad, but at least you can cast a spell to revert the transformation, or heck, maybe even the enemies will just randomly transform them back too, because some enemies just constantly cast Toad, so they'll cast Toad on a person, make them a Toad, then they'll cast Toad again and make them a human. So sometimes you don't even have to do anything and they'll just re-transform them back. In sleep, they just wake up in one hit, but paralyzation is absolutely horrid. First of all, there's no spell besides Asana, which can only target one character, or a rare item known as the Unicorn Horn, which can apply to everybody, but again, it's rare unless you grind for it. I'm sure there's someplace you grind for it, but I'm not going to grind for it. Paralyzation is super annoying because it locks up your character. You can't do a single act, and if they hit most of your parties, or if they hit the person that can cast Usana, then you're stuck there watching them just wail on your party until they either eventually, in a forever time, they become unparalyzed. And it's so incredibly annoying to just sit there and do nothing, because I'm sure you could go back to the menu, but if you're in the middle of a dungeon, you don't want to have to redo all that section. So paralyzation is absolutely awful, and there's so many enemies that can cause paralyzation, and I haven't had complete team wipes, but even if they don't game over you, they're just super annoying and just a huge time waster. You're just spending so much time trying to wait for the paralyzation to wear off, and I guess you could just run away. But overall, paralyzation is such an annoying condition in this one as compared to previous ones. We now see bosses have more ingrained mechanics now, such as the first boss can't be intact while in mist form. However, these usually end up being annoying rather than innovative. For example, in the Dr. Legame fight, he has everybody poisoned, right? He'll use poison gas on everybody. Then, anytime he takes damage, he'll randomly put a character on your team to sleep. Then, once half or most of your team is asleep, he'll just use Panacea, which cures him of both the poison and sleep, and then he'll just reapply the poison and sleep. It's just so annoying. There's so many bosses in here that just have really dumb mechanics, such as casting Reflect on themselves or draining the party of NP. The bosses' mechanics, like I said, they just end up being super sloggy and instead of innovative, just really annoying to fight. And the worst part is that sometimes the game tells you what the mechanics do. Like in the first fight, they'll tell you, hey, don't hit the dragon while in mist form. And then in other fights, they're like, hey, you need to use this action when the character's like this. And then sometimes they just don't tell you at all. Pick a lane, game. Either tell us in the beginning and then wane us off of telling us the mechanics, or just don't tell us at all. Because the game will tell you, not tell you, then tell you again, then not tell you. And it's like, sometimes I wish it would tell me what to do, because sometimes I didn't understand what the whole point of this boss was. And then other times, it was completely pointless. But overall, bosses just ended up being boring, sluggish, annoying, all those other words that mean bad. It was bad. I just didn't like bosses in this one. At least the boss music was somewhat okay to listen to. One of the worst features that come from battles that some bosses have is that whenever they take damage, like I said with Lugain, they'll either get a free attack to hit back or they'll cast a condition on the party. Now usually this is good for a boss. Yeah, it makes sense on a boss. The Antlion hits your party back whenever you hit it. It can be annoying, but at least it's stuck to a boss. Or so I thought, because later on in the game, there are tons of enemies that get a free counterattack whenever you hit them. Just normal enemies that you encounter. The most two notable annoying creatures that have these are normal enemies that show up a lot in the end game. The first one being a gold dragon. Whenever you hit the gold dragon, it will constrict and paralyze a random party member. And that's so annoying because every time it takes damage, it will attempt to constrict someone. Luckily, you find equipment that basically says, hey, this party member can't be paralyzed, and that kind of becomes nothing. But before you get that equipment, you're facing off these gold dragons because that equipment's in that dungeon. And probably the worst common enemy to have this is the behemoth. Every time it takes damage, it is either 2 to 3 shotting your party members. Now, one's bad enough. Sometimes you encounter 2. I ran from every fight that had 2 behemoths because this is just, it's so annoying. It should be kept to bosses. Normal enemies shouldn't have this. And while we're talking about annoying stuff, I was really upset to see dungeons were just awful in this one. Now, previously, at least you had like job points for random encounters to look forward to, and the dungeons were short and sweet in Final Fantasy III, and I thought they would continue that, but no. Here, they made them long, and super long again. They have mazes in them. I'm not going to go over every single dungeon, but dungeons here are just so long and winding and just annoying to go through. Again, not having job points or anything to earn towards your characters. I missed it, but other times, since the dungeons are long, they do technically level up your characters enough to fight the final boss, but I just think they could have been short and sweeter because, like I said in Final Fantasy III, it just gives you more the sense of more adventures that you're going on. Overall, I did not enjoy the design of the dungeons. The battle scenes were okay. I like the battle scenes. Now, a cool feature that's in dungeons that I hope they keep going forward is that there's rest spots where you can save, or if you have a tent or cottage, you can use that while you're in that rest spot, and that is amazing. They either have 2 save points, either a third and 2/3 of the way in, or 1 halfway in. So I'd imagine this was great in the old game where you didn't have autosave, but here I enjoyed them because they're like mini hotspots where you could just go and use a bunch of tents if you had them. Now eventually you could just buy a bunch of cottages, so you just res everybody and then sleep in the cottage and you get all your MP back and all your health back. So that is really nice, and if they're going to keep doing longer dungeons, I hope to see this in the games coming forward, at least in 5 and 6. We have various forms of travelings, no underwater, but you do go to the underworld, which is just rock and lava. You get a big airship, similar to Final Fantasy III's Invincible, which lets you travel to the moon. You also get a hovercraft, which is basically the canoe of this game. There's multiple airships. You do get a ship, but it immediately gets sunk. There's no water travel unless you want to count the hovercraft. There's no sections where you get a ship and travel around in the oceans, which, I mean, it's cool that they did something different, but I kind of miss having a ship to sail around on. I don't know, it just felt like it made the world bigger, at least to me. Since we're talking about traveling, chocobos are back, and now they're spaced out, but once again, chocobos aren't really used to their full advantage. I mean, at least you do have to use one in a certain section of the game, but that was more just to get you to travel and level up before you got to this area that you needed to go to. Now in Chocobo Forest you have the yellow chocobo, which does the same thing. You don't encounter enemies on the map and you run faster across the map. You have white chocobos, which restore all your MP, so Chocobo Forest made good rest spots. And now we have black chocobos, which can fly short distances and can only land in forests. So that whole area of the game, you land in this big forest and you have to walk all the way up to the Chocobo Forest, hop on it and fly over to the cave, and then hop on it, fly back to the Chocobo Forest, then you fly back on it to the town if you don't want to walk all the way down. And then that's it. That's all the chocobo travel you did. I did use it in one other section because you don't have the airship around there, but that was just more for convenience. Rather than sitting through a bunch of random battles, I just used it to travel back. And then that's it for chocobos. The fat chocobo's back. I never used it. I didn't use it at all. I mean, I understand now because you have a max inventory, but if you just do regular inventory maintenance, then you never need to use a fat chocobo. I never even summoned it at all. So that is it. That is all the game features I want to go over that I've touched up on. Overall, the game felt sluggish and even frustrating at times due to the long dungeons or the tedious boss mechanics. I died a lot more times in this one than I did the previous ones, either due to some dumb decisions or me panicking because of active time battle, and I even died to the final boss 5 times, whereas the other ones were 1 or 2, and it's annoying. Because you have to sit through a 1 to 2 minute cutscene, 2 characters fighting the final boss. Oh, he's dead. Uh-oh, he actually got really strong. And now we have to sit here as everyone cheers on the final party to fight the final boss. It's great the first time, but when you start to die a lot because the boss is total BS, let me give you a little description of what the final boss is like. So after you have sat through this long cutscene, you finally get to fight the final boss. You can't do any pre-buffs, but you have to use this item on the boss, and this reveals its true form, and then it will start wailing on your team. You have barely any time with your characters to select actions, because immediately the boss will start off with bio, so maybe you want to put up some reflect or shell to help with that, and then after casting bio, which does like half or so damage, then it casts Big Bang, which is another AoE spell that can't be reduced by anything that does a lot of damage. Starting out, I died multiple times because the boss would go to bio, I would go to ready up Cure, and then immediately the boss would cast Big Bang and wipe out most of my party. Then by the time the last person even gets an action or prepares an action, the boss immediately casted Big Bang and killed everybody else. So the boss would just do that every time I went and fought it. Then, by some random chance, where it casted bio than Big Bang, for some reason, I was a bit more prepared this time. I had gotten some levels, okay, I got some equipment, I'd admit it. But Big Bang definitely would have just screwed me over. It casted Flare, which does nowhere near the damage as bio or Big Bang, and it only targets one person instead of your team. And because of that, I was able to cure everybody and get everybody basically going and then into the loop where I eventually beat it. So I don't know why, but the boss decided to do something different. After dying to it 3 to 4 times, it decided to do something different. So the boss fight was super annoying. The music wasn't even that good, at least compared to the other ones. I'll get into it in the music section. Overall, since the game has active time battle and saving in dungeons, those are some pretty good features, but everything else sucked. Sluggish mechanics. We have long and winding dungeons, tedious boss mechanics, annoying, stupid little enemy mechanics such as paralyzation and being able to act immediately, breaking active time battle. Overall, this game felt like I was playing Final Fantasy 1 and 2, but even worse. I don't know how, but this game felt awful to play through. I almost gave up on it. I wanted to give up on it when I got like not even halfway through. I just did not like playing this game. It wasn't fun to me. There were moments that were fun, but for the most part, I was just groaning and frustrating, and I didn't have any fun. This game gets no gold coins. And you know what the worst part about that? Even though I didn't give it a gold coin, this isn't even the worst section. That's the kicker. This section was long, but I think there's an even longer section. This episode might be my longest episode. This game, I feel like I have to explain to you guys why this game just did not work for me. But we're moving on to our next section. We'll go by really fast. Sound design, voice acting, and music. Sound design was okay, no bad sounds, but no good sounds either, aside from the usual, like casting Mega Flare. No voice acting, although the arrangement adds some chanting to 1 or 2 of the tracks. But overall, the music was okay. We have the theme of love, which I love. Get it? I love the theme of love. See, I'm doing it again. Seriously, I really do like the theme of love. Aside from the battle theme, which I was at first, it started to grow on me. The boss theme is good, and the fiend battle themes, which are 4 bosses, 4 not mini bosses. They're a step above a boss, but they're not the final boss. But their song is called Battle Against the Four Fiends. That song is really good. It's on the same level as Theme of Love. And then the rest of the songs are kind of eh. The final boss theme is, it's okay. It works for a final boss theme. It wasn't just as energetic as the Final Fantasy III's final boss battle. It doesn't help that I didn't like the final boss at all. I didn't have fun with it. It was really annoying. I didn't even feel good after beating it. I was like, oh, I guess I beat it. Yay, I don't get to play this game anymore. But aside from that, the Black Chocobo track is really fine. And then I also like Rydia's songs. So there are songs in here that I really enjoyed. There was no bad songs. So overall, the music, sound design, voice acting section, it's going to get 2 gold coins. Well, if you made it this far, I hope you're still locked in because this section's going to be a doozy. I am going to tear this game apart, and I don't. Writing is probably one of my shortest sections in most of my episodes. But here, for some reason, the writing was just so bad, it stuck with me. So now I'm not going to go into every detail that I didn't like about the story because we'd be here all day. Tricked you! I am. I'm going to go over every single character, their main points, and why they just don't work. At the end, I will go through and say how I would fix it to make it better. And then you guys can comment and maybe I missed points about the story or something. Maybe I'm wrong about this entire section. But if you guys feel that way, then let me know. Anyways, I'm going to start tearing this game apart. I hope you're ready. I'm going to be all over the place. I'm going to be rambling. You could skip ahead if you want to, but if you're like me, you love seeing things being torn apart. So, the main story can take anywhere from probably 20 to 30 hours, maybe less if you know what you're doing, and more if you don't. The game was very easy to follow, and I never had to look up a guide, which you can tell that means it's easy to follow. I had to look up a guide for Final Fantasy II at certain sections, but here, I didn't have to look at it at all. Now, I kept saying this, but to put it plainly, the story itself sucks. So much so, I don't even know where to begin. So, I'm just going to give you a short synopsis, and then, like I said, I'm going to go over all the main characters, at least the ones that are able to join your party, and why I disliked most of them in no particular order. Once again, I am giving you a major spoiler warning. I'm going to absolutely go over every single twist in the game because these twists do not twist good. Let's start with our synopsis. Final Fantasy IV is about the Dark Blade Cecile seeking redemption, I say this lightly, and eventually traveling the world to stop Golbez and his master, or the character mind controlling him, and their plot to destroy the world, in which Cecile will meet a variety of characters that come and go, for awful reasons, mind you, eventually with some permanent party members. Now, let's go over all the main party members, explaining their plots, and why I disliked them. First off, we're starting with the characters that I didn't really feel anything towards. We have Edward. Edward is a bard and prince of a kingdom that's destroyed near the beginning, and he is tied to Tella through Tella's daughter by being in love with her. She dies, and he travels with the party, but is portrayed as a coward due to his run ability. However, after a scene where he defends himself against one monster, and Tella's daughter appears to him, telling him to keep fighting, except he doesn't. He gets attacked by this antlion, and then he's separated to a ship attack along with Yang and Rydia, which I'll say a lot of character names. Just know any character name that I do say, they are in this list, so don't worry about too much about who these characters are because I will eventually go over them. But regardless, he is separated in this shipwreck that involves Yang, Rydia, and Cecile, and he is bedridden for literally most of the game. He has a moment where he saves the party against a boss so they can get a crystal to trade for kidnapped Rosa, and then that's it. He shows up on this airship where everybody's starting to show up to fight this golem. But aside from that, he's bedridden for literally everything after the shipwreck. He's just bedridden. So I don't really have any feeling towards Edward. I don't dislike him, but I don't like him as a character anyways, and I felt like his exit was super just not good. I'll explain a more natural way once I get to that part later on. The other character I feel indifferent, probably because he's not in the party a lot, is Fusoya. He's a Lunarian, which is basically a human from the moon. He shows up to help the party stop a golem. Then he frees Golbez from the actual main villain before leaving with Golbez, and wow, this is actually probably the only natural way somebody leaves their party here. From what what I remember. Like I said, I'm going over everybody, but his is the only one that felt like, wow, this is actually a good way for him to leave the party. Because when the characters leave, they're really just leaving because the mechanics need them to leave. So, for example, they don't want to overload you with a bunch of spellcasters, so they'll have some spellcasters leave, and then they'll have more marshals or spellcasters join you later on. So, in order for them to leave the party, they have some variety of ways that they do it. But I'll get into each person and how they leave the party, if they leave the party, for whatever reasons. But going on about Fusoya, yeah, I felt nothing to him. He was there with the party. He's just your generic smart old man. And he knows a bunch of spells, and he's a really good spellcaster. But he's barely with the party if you don't go around and do all the optional stuff while he's in your party. I mean, you can do that. But for me, I've already done everything. So I just had him in the party, and then I went and did the main story. He, left almost immediately. I didn't even spend, an hour with him in the party. And now we're going to start getting into the characters I disliked. Now, some of them, I liked them, but I disliked what the story did with them. So, let's start with Yang. He's a high-ranking martial artist from a martial artist kingdom. When the party finds him, he had just lost his squad of high-ranking martial artists to a bunch of monsters, and he's the only survivor. He joins the party from time, separates after the shipwreck, becomes mind-controlled, but then immediately freed, and he's just a confident dude, nothing serious, until he decides to sacrifice himself for no reason. Literally, for no reason. I played through this section when I was recording it, and I read it. He's not sacrificing for himself at all. I don't understand why he's sacrificing himself here. It doesn't even feel like where he's pushing a character, a boulder's falling down on top of them, they push the character out of the way and they get crushed. It doesn't feel like that. It doesn't seem like it feels like that. Overall, I just don't like him. He's just a martial artist. He just goes with Cecile because his king tells him to, because they need to save the world, and he doesn't really have his own. I mean, that's plenty of motivation enough, but he doesn't really have that much stay in it until he decides to sacrifice himself. But again, the pointless sacrifice just made him feel overall more dumb. While we're on the topic of pointless sacrifices, let's talk about a character that I actually somewhat like, and that's the engineer Sid. Sid worked with Cecile making his airships when Cecile was the commander of them. He has a daughter, and he's an old crazy workaholic. I mean, just look at this portrait, just look at this animation. He's an absolute gremlin, goblin certified. However, shortly after Yang sacrifices himself, he exits the tower, he saves the party by flying an airship and catching them as they're falling from the tower, and then he immediately hops off the airship strapped with explosives to cause a cave-in because they're being chased by normal airship. Now, Golbez was in control of some airships that were controlled with monsters, but at this point, Golbez is dead. This is just a normal airship with normal monsters chasing the party, and he just decides, oh, I need to cause a cave-in so the players can't get back to the underworld for some time. It's really dumb story-wise. Again, I'll get into a better way that they could have had these characters naturally exit the party. But again, it's just so dumb. They just had two sacrifices right in a row, and both of them felt extremely pointless. Let's talk about the last sacrifice, or sacrifices, since these are twins. And they are Palram and Palam, or however you say it. I never learned them, but you can see their name on screen. They are twin siblings. The sister is super studious and keeps her brother in check, while her brother is overconfident and super bratty. Again, look at this smug a-hole. Mechanically, they're fun because they get twin cast and they can cast powerful spells like Pyro and Comet, and they accompany Cecile during his time when he's changing from a Dark Knight into a Paladin, and they stick with him for a little bit up until they sacrifice themselves after defeating an Elemental Lord. The party runs into a room. The Elemental Lord's like, you can't defeat me, I'm taking you guys out with me. And he starts to shut the room in on them, where the twins decide to immediately turn themselves to stone, become statues, and sacrifice themselves. Tella tries to use Asana to cure them, doesn't work, and you can interact with them and use a gold needle, but again, it doesn't work due to they willingly turn themselves into stone, and thus the spell can't be undone, or something like that. Overall, it was sad to see. This was one of the sacrifices that really, compared to the other two that were pointless, this was a really hard to watch sacrifice. It just sucked because they were kids, and these young characters were more willing to sacrifice their lives than for the party, or at least in the short time. No one really had any decision to make, but I'll get more into about that later on with a certain character. Now, let's talk about the most annoying character, both mechanically and narratively, and that's Tella. I went over his recall ability, but eventually he loses it and he gains a bunch of white and black spells. That's awesome, except he can't go above 99 MP, or at least you never have him in the party long enough to get him above that unless you decide to grind it out, but I'm pretty sure his max MP is 99. One of the best spells to use, Full Life, which revives a party unit with full HP, costs 52. He spends most of his mana either trying to revive people or casting really damaging spells such as Fyraga? Is that how you say it? Anyway, these spells cost like 30 MP to use, so he only gets to cast like a couple spells. At least you can get Drain, but Drain doesn't work on all enemies, so you're probably going to spend a lot of ether on him. His whole deal is that he's hunting down Edward for swooning his daughter, even though she's an adult and went willingly with Edward because they are actually in love, but Tella just didn't want to believe her. He thought this bard was just pulling the wool over her eyes or whatever, so he goes after Edward. So he joins Cecile because they have to get to the Northern Kingdom where Edward is. So once they reach there, Gobez's army kills Tella's daughter. He vows revenge, leaves the party. He has to go learn Meteor. And then whenever Cecile becomes a paladin, there's a bright flashlight. Tella suddenly remembers all his spells and he learns Meteor. He travels with the party until you guys confront Gobez. He goes off into a 1v1 with Gobez. Mind you, Meteor costs 99. He doesn't even have enough MP to even cast Meteor unless you specifically grind levels to have him at least have 99 MP, but then he's using all his MP to cast Meteor. But throughout the game, people tell him that, hey, if you cast Meteor, you are going to die because it will sap all your life force. Well, he's so bent on revenge that he casts Meteor against Gobez. Surprise! Doesn't kill Gobez. The only thing it does, it breaks free Kane from his mind control, which I'll get into Kane later on. And that's it. He casts Meteor, doesn't get revenge, barely does anything, dies. He just dies. And it's like, I was happy, because that means that pointless spellcaster couldn't have been on my team anymore. I felt nothing when he died. It felt so like I just didn't care. He was already a dumb character, and I guess it's like, oh, he was so strived for revenge that it consumed him, and then he doesn't even get his revenge. He's such a tragic hero, but he's such a tragic spellcaster. I hated Tella. He's probably the most annoying character in the game, if I have to say. His whole storyline, his whole mechanically, narratively, plot lines are all just, it's all stupid. But let's talk about the second most annoying character. At least he's good mechanically, but I dislike Edge, and sadly he's one of the permanent party members, and he never leaves once he joins the party, for better or for worse. He's an overconfident, cocky, narcissistic lady chaser. He swoons over Rydia and a bit over Rosa, and it's just overall annoying. Sure, I felt bad when his parents were turned into horrible monsters and willingly ended themselves for his betterment, saying, hey, you need to take care of our kingdom because you're the prince. But he learns absolutely nothing. He watches him die, and then immediately, like, not immediately, but later on, he just learned nothing. And it's like seeing your parents turn into monsters and then die before your eyes would mess you up. But he's just so unaffected because he's so cool and edgy. He's Edge, the edgy ninja. Oh yeah, mechanically, he can throw stuff like ninjas previously, shurikens, and he can dual wield katanas. He's just so cool, man. He's just, I hate him. I just didn't care. And mechanically, he's like okay. During the final boss fight, he was the last priority member to be revived. Overall, I just disliked him. He just doesn't learn anything. And again, he's just super like narcissistic lady chaser. Not in a charming way. Like Palram, the brother, he's the smug a-hole and he's confident in himself. But it's kind of charming because he has a sister to keep him in check. But they were fun to watch. Edge, I just don't like him. Sadly, he's just a permanent party member, and I hope in After Years, which is the direct sequel to this game, I hope he doesn't get with Rydia, but they heavily implied that he's going to end up with Rydia, despite how much she doesn't like him. Moving on, let's talk about characters that I thought were okay, but once I really thought about it, which is why I'm re-recording all of this anyways, which is probably why it's super long, but let's talk about the devoted lover of Cecile, Rosa. she's an awesome white mage and probably the best unit in the entire game. Because, you know, healing to full life and reviving people back to full damage. But she can even put out good damage if you give her a bow. And she has the aim command, which I don't really know what aim does. Like, I think it increases critical chance, I think. And then her other ability, Prey, is just like a free Kiraga, which sometimes works and then sometimes it doesn't. But hey, it's free at least. I'd rather just spend the MP and get the definite Kiraga than hoping to cast MP. Like, I mean, if you're like on the end of your rope and you absolutely need a cure and you're out of MP, then I guess you can do it. For the most part, it's usually just a wasted turn. At first, like I said, I liked her. But then I stepped back and now I just don't really care. She is super devoted, super supportive, and super loyal to Cecile, but that's it. Her motivations are because she wants to be near Cecile, and that's it. She doesn't have her own stakes besides, you know, save the world, but even then, that doesn't really feel like that. It's only because Cecile wants to save the world that she wants to save the world. I'm pretty sure if Cecile didn't want to save the world, then she probably wouldn't have cared anyways. She is, again, super supportive, and she does somewhat show her own thing. But throughout the game, she's kind of just like a damsel in distress. And that's it, because Cecile has to save her twice. Once when she chases after Cecile and catches Desert Fever, which Cecile has to save her with help from Rydia and Edward. And the other time when she's captured by Gobez and has to be saved by Cecile again and the party. And that's the part where they had to trade the crystal for her or whatever. Then she actually stands up for herself once at the end in a stupid drama scene that I'll go over later. Overall, Rosa just felt like a nothing character. Like, she didn't have any sort of personal motivations. Like, I get it. Being super devoted, being really in love with Cecile, that's really admirable of someone being so loyal to someone that they'll follow them to the ends of the earth. But it's also not the only key thing. They should have some sort of deeper motivation, but I'll get into that when I'll go over how I would fix the story. But overall, she's just a nothing character. Now, before I get into the characters I like, let's talk about the last character that I was okay with, and now I really just don't like him. And that's the main character, Cecile. Once I stepped back and looked at the game overall, I didn't like him. I think I have some pretty valid reasons. Let's go over everything first. First of all, he starts as a Dark Knight seeking redemption after slaughtering not one, but 2 villages under the command of Baron. He's remorseful, but he accepts his fate as a Dark Knight until he accidentally kills Rydia's mother. She was a summoner. They slayed a dragon that in turn kill her because the dragon is part of her since she's a summoner. And then he vows to protect Rydia with his life. Then he just kept taking L's, or so I thought. But it wasn't really taking them because he was just letting it happen. First of all, he redeems himself and becomes a paladin, vowing to protect people. However, it feels like the only reason he became a paladin was due to the village elder told him that he wasn't able to defeat Gobez unless he became a paladin. So I guess it was a bit about redeeming himself, but he just really wanted to kick Gobez's butt. So he's like, sure, I guess I'll go become a paladin now. Like, yeah, I wanted to redeem myself, but I really just want to kick Gobez's butt. So then he goes off and he becomes a paladin. And remember how I said he took the vows to protect others as opposed to raising his sword force? He really doesn't try to protect anybody. Remember all those pointless sacrifices? I feel like he could have protected them, or at least said something more about it. Usually they would say, hey, I'm gonna sacrifice myself. He would just be like, wait, no, don't do that. And then that's it. And then afterwards, he'd be like, darn, lost another one. And he just moves on. At least, like, show something. He just kept moving on. And remember Rydia that he vowed to protect with his life? Whenever the shipwreck happens and they're separated from everyone, he finds out that she was swallowed by Leviathan. Which, granted, what are you going to do against Leviathan? But all he goes is like, darn, I need to go save my girlfriend. Because Rosa was kidnapped at the time. So he doesn't try anything to save these people. Like when Palram and Palam became statues, he doesn't exhaust all his options throughout this entire game. I mean, I guess he saved the people of the world, but he never really like tried to help the people closest to him. The only person he helped was Rosa, and everything else he kind of just let him happen. He has high strength. He could have physically stopped him, but he never physically tried to do anything. And then he acts remorseful at times, but not really. He kind of just accepts like, oh, they sacrificed themselves. I guess that's what they wanted, and moves on. Dude, you vowed to protect people's lives. That's your whole deal. Why didn't you try to do anything? He just doesn't. And what makes it worse, towards the end of the game, which I went and recorded, there's this scene of drama or something where he finally, oh, I'm a man and we're men. You ladies, Rosa and Rydia, need to stay here, and I need to go to the moon with these guys and take care of it because I don't want to see you guys hurt. After dragging them through 75% of the game, through all these dangerous situations, now you care? Suddenly now this is the big issue? And then he doesn't even stick to his guns. Like, if you're at least going to be a douchebag, at least, like, stick to your guns. And then, when they get to the moon, because Rosa and Rydia act like they leave, you know they don't leave, but when they get to the moon, Rosa shows up and she's like, I'm not leaving your side, I'm sticking with you. He's like, okay, I guess. And that's it. It was so pointless. What a stupid, pointless scene. Why does he suddenly care now about saving people's lives? He didn't try with anybody else. So, overall, Cecile, once again, it feels like a nothing person. He seemingly uncares. He shows remorse sometimes, but oftentimes he just moves on immediately. He has no, self-reflection throughout this entire game. His only character development was becoming a paladin, and that's it. Finally, let's talk about the two characters I actually like without anything else. You know, I like Sid, but I hated his sacrifice. Yang was okay, but I hated his sacrifice. So, these two characters I actually like with nothing. I don't have anything, negative to say about them. They have some negative stuff that happens to them, but overall, I like them as characters. Starting with Kane. Kane is a dragoon and sort of like a brother to Cecile, being raised by the Baron and sticking with Cecile's side until they meet Rydia. Or he promised to meet with Rydia, but then Rydia doesn't trust him because they just killed her mother. She casts this Titan, separating Cecile and Kane, where he would then become mind-controlled, partially as the final boss kind of amplified part of Kane's need to prove himself over Cecile to Rosa. There's kind of like a weird love triangle between Kane, Rosa, and Cecile, but they never really talk about it. Kane just makes one offhand comment. He's like, I'll prove to you that I'm better than Cecile, Rosa. That's about it. It never comes up again. Kane just kind of feels inferior to Cecile throughout the rest of the game. But the first time he's mind-controlled, he's broken free when telecasts his meteor. Immediately, he shows remorse for his action and even just wants to, disappear because he does not feel like he deserves to fight alongside heroes like Cecile and Rosa. I use that term hero lately. But he doesn't feel like he deserves to fight alongside them until Cecile and Rosa ask him to. They convince him to join them to try to redeem himself. Later on, he would be controlled once more, sealing the final crystal for Gobez after Cecile got his hands on it. Then, when Gobez is freed by Fusoya, Kane is also freed again, and now he feels even worse, showing even more remorse for his actions. You can see it in the scene there. I think he wants to join them, but he doesn't feel like he's redeemable now. He's so hard on himself, even though he was mostly not in control of his actions, but he actually puts effort in to redeem himself than some other character that actively doesn't try to protect anybody despite taking a vow to protect people, and he suddenly thinks he's redeemed because he became a paladin. Look, Cecile, all those things he done, the village slaughter and all that, he done that willingly. Obviously he didn't willingly kill Rydia's mom, but he did follow Baron's orders to go to the village and to slaughter the village. Cecile willingly followed the Baron's order. He could have stopped. He could have gone against the Baron's order. Would it have been bad for him? Sure. But he willingly kept going through because he's like, I'm a Darkblade. That's what I have to do. Whereas Kane, maybe he done some bad stuff, but we weren't actively shown that. And throughout most of this game, he is mind controlled. But for the most part, he's not willingly in control of his actions, and he shouldn't feel that bad. Of course, you're going to feel bad if you're forced to do something. You feel like you're mentally not stronger. But he shows that he's remorseful. And by the end of the game, he doesn't even attend Cecile and Rosa's wedding because he doesn't deem himself worthy. He goes off to the same place where Cecile Cecile had redeemed himself to Mount Ordeals, where he had become a paladin. He goes off there promising himself to be better and become a better dragoon, to become a better person than he was. And that's how you do redemption. Cecile never felt like he redeemed himself because, again, like I said, he just kept letting people die. Sure, eventually he saved the world, but it doesn't really excuse everything in between. I mean, Cain technically also helped save the world. So I really just liked Cain as a character, and mechanically he was as good as a dragoon. I mean, that jump ability is really good. He can't be targeted by damage or anything, and then he comes down and does a lot of damage. So overall, I just really enjoyed Cain. He's kind of a permanent party member, which I forgot to say, Rosa becomes a permanent. Once you save her the second time, she's a permanent party member. But here, Cain, you know, he gets mind controlled, he's freed, joins the party, mind controlled, and then when he's freed, he joins the party forever. Overall, I think Cain has a great redemption. I would love to see him in after years be the main character. It'd be nice to see him go through his redemption. So I'm not really sure what they could do in after years, but if anything, I hope he's the main character, which, by the way, Cain is the character that's in the title splash. So 2 had Fenrion, 1 and 3 don't really have main characters with actual names, so they just have a guy with swords. And then 4 has Cain, where I think it should have been Cecile or Rosa, since they are more main characters than Cain is. But that was pretty unique in a way to use a not highly contributing to the... I'm not going to try to justify or anything. I just thought it was weird that Cain was the one in the title splash. Now finally, the last and my favorite character is Rydia, a summoner who starts out as a little girl until she becomes an adult due to being taken to the land of summons, with the time flowing different there. Rydia is shown to be powerful and even independent, and has the only... it's not the sacrifice, but she has the best moment of something I'm going to keep secret until we get to that part. Just know that she disappears and then she comes back. The only dumb part about her plotline is that when the shipwreck happens due to Leviathan, it felt stupid. Like, why is Leviathan targeting Rydia? Like, yeah, she's a summoner, but he doesn't need to destroy the ship and kill most of the crew and swallow her. He could have just asked. Regardless, I was upset thinking Rydia was dead or even lost when she was swallowed by Leviathan, and even more by Cecile's stupidity or just his lack of care about her. Yeah, he promised his life to save her, and then he just does not care. He's like sad about it once, and then he doesn't try to actually do anything to save her. I thought maybe after Rosa they would try to go and save her, but no, they don't do that. It's like he just doesn't care. But when she does show back up, she does save the party. It was one of the only times throughout the entire story that I was genuinely excited. It was I was lost for words when it showed up, and I'm lost for words now. But just know, it was so exciting to see her come back, and she stays as a permanent party member for the rest of the game. But not only is she now this powerful black mage, but she's also a powerful summoner, and you can fight summons. They have like little boss battles with their own mechanics, but once you beat them, you get them as summons, and they're very powerful. Leviathan and Bahamut are really powerful, and I even use Asura, which has a chance to cast Karaja, Protect, and Life on the entire party. Okay, if everyone's dead and you cast it, there's a chance you could just revive everybody. That's so good. If Rosa is technically the best unit due to her healing, I think Rydia is the second best due to her powerful magic and summoning magic. She was like the second person up, like if Rosa went down in the final boss, she was the next person that I would want to revive, just because of how powerful all her magic and summons are. But now as an adult, she's shown to be independent and strong, and she has her own reason for following the party. Of course, she's following Leviathan tells her to go after the party, but she did it on her own free will. It's not like she has that connection to Cecile or Rosa. Like, I imagine if they went like a foster parent route where Cecile and Rosa acted as parents towards Rydia, then it might have been more like that, but they didn't. She's following the party because she wants to, not because anybody else. I think Leviathan tells her where they're at, but he doesn't explicitly tell her to go after them. She's following them of her own path. Overall, I enjoyed her character development. Like I said, if Cecile and Rosa had acted more like parents to her throughout the game, then I think that would have made some more impactful moments, especially when they got separated. But aside from that, I enjoyed Rydia overall. She's just my favorite character. She has her own theme, and she's probably the best well-written, aside from the Leviathan part, but she's probably the best well-written character in the game. Now, with the characters out of the way and why I dislike them, let's talk about the truly annoying, awful, contrived, meaningless, you get the idea, part of the game. Those sacrifices from before, completely undone. Sid is the first one you find, or is the easiest as he's just sleeping in the dwarves' infirmary. Then Yang is found in the cave of Sylvans, sleeping. Then, in a big moment where people are coming down to help down a golem, Sid and Yang showing up. But you kind of already know that they're alive. I mean, Yang's in an optional dungeon with no reward at the end, but if you didn't go there, you wouldn't know he's alive. You know Sid's alive, so seeing him there, and then seeing Yang there, or you can kind of expect it, but then the twins show up. And they're just like, hey, did you miss me? And it just undoes their heavy sacrifice completely. And the worst part is they even say how they were transformed. You know how Tella tried to cast her Sana? Or how if you use a gold needle, it gave you, because they turned themselves into stone, they willingly can't be undone. They're just like, yeah, the Elder saved us. And that's it. That's the only reason they give. They might explain more in after years, but it's like, why didn't they just go grab the Elder? There wasn't like at points where like, oh, we desperately need to chase after Gomez. They could have just gone and grabbed the Elder and just unturned him from stone at any time. Why suddenly, just for the sake of the story, for them to show back up? It's so stupid. Like, you see Sid, that sacrifice is undone. You can go find Yang, or see him at the airship. That sacrifice is undone. Powham and Powham show up. That sacrifice is undead. Look, when Rydia is followed by Leviathan, she is opposed as dead, or the party hopes that she's alive. Then when she comes back, you're like, oh, hero returning alive. That's so awesome. At least for me, that was awesome. And a story can get one. They get one of those. Like in Final Fantasy III, when you see Desh come back alive, that was a eye-opener at least. And then you expect Arya in there, who also sacrificed herself, to come back, but she doesn't. The game actually lets her say dead, which treats her sacrifice with respect. Here, people are just sacrificing themselves, and the stakes are just gone because they just come back anyways. There are points when near the end of the game, 2 people die, Gomez and Fusuya, or it looks like they died, because they kind of just show up as spirits to empower the party against the final boss, but they just stand up. Because, again, I knew they weren't going to die, at least at this point, unless the character is physically shown dying on screen, then I'm not going to believe that they are dead. Because Tella is shown to die, but then, because of all these sacrifices, I half expected him to come down from the heavens and forget what spell he was going to cast, and then reascend back into heaven. Overall, this moment in this game just felt like a knee to the face. I already wasn't caring about the game, and now it was just annoying. It was so stupid. Why even have them come back? I guess, I get it. You can mechanically needed them to leave so the party can go to the next area. But there are better ways than using the hero returning alive 5 different times. Again, like I said, you get Rydia, and then everything after that it just makes the sacrifices pointless. Story-wise, I'm happy because Yang has a wife and Sid has a daughter that are now alone if they have died, but now they're alive. But that just means that their sacrifice, if they would have died, would have been way heavier. But they're not, because they just come back alive. It's pointless. Let's talk about how I would fix it. Let's start with Rydia, my favorite character. First of all, let's just have Leviathan ask Cecile if he can take her and train her to be a better summoner. Then with Leviathan being all-knowing, he could just point Cecile towards the Mount of Ordeals to become a paladin. That way, Cecile can have that decision weigh on him more than just, oh, she's swallowed by Leviathan, can't do anything. Or you could have Leviathan kidnapped her, deeming Cecile unworthy, making Cecile want to redeem himself even more. I mean, if he actually cared more than what he's shown, but having him taken from her would have been way more impactful, and that would want Cecile to go improve himself, giving him even a better reason to become a paladin than just to beat Gomez. At least in my opinion, that would have been a much better change. Then Leviathan didn't have to pointlessly kill all those people in the ship or get rid of the ship. I don't know why you got rid of the ship. I think you could have came up with better reasons. You could have just had Gomez blown up the ship or something like that than just having Leviathan randomly do this. There's no one that tells you, hey, better be careful, there's a giant monster wrecking ships. There might have been a person or two that I talked to, but throughout the entire game, no one ever says, wow, don't go sailing. I heard the king of the sea is out destroying ships. Nothing like that ever happens. But I think that decision to write a story would have been more impactful. And instead of having Sid just jump off the ship, have Sid use the autopilot of the ship, because the airships are shown to have autopilot. Just have him fly and catch the party while keeping him with the dwarves to help the dwarves bolster their defenses, because he's an engineer and maybe he even wants to learn from them. Then when the party is being flown away on the airship and he sees them being chased down by the enemy airship, he could just from the ground shoot at the enemy airship to cause a cave-in, telling the party to, fly away and he'll handle the rest. This, instead of like, oh, maybe he's dead or maybe he's alive, is a lot better than just he sacrificed himself. Then when you see him later on, you're like, oh, he's actually alive, and you can kind of assume because the dwarves are alive. So you can just automatically, it's not like, it leaves it up to the player to decide if they want to believe if Sid is dead or not, rather than just the game showing that Sid is sacrificing himself. I think that would be much better. And then Yang, instead of having Yang sacrifice himself in the tower, have him wanting to protect the dwarves, that because these goblins are shooting down, you defeat the goblins override the cannons or whatever and causes the room to explode. That's when Yang pushes himself out. Instead of that, have him fail to save some of the dwarves, and then all the previous losses, for example, it reminds him on the mountain when he had lost all his high martial artist squad to the monsters. It makes him feel worthless or not strong enough, and then he's like, I need to lead the party, guys. I have to go train. I have to get stronger, not only for myself but for my people. And then have him just leave the party to train in the underworlds and go train with the Sullivan. That way when he shows up later, it's not like a kick in your face, like, oh, again, like with Sid, you don't see him sacrifice himself. You just know he's out there alive somewhere in this treacherous underworld. For the twins, let's just leave the twins' sacrifices alone. Their sacrifice is good and can be put on heavier by having an ending cutscene. There was a person I was discussing in Discord and they had said this. I'm like, yeah, that would have been way better. But they had said that it would have been better to see them as statues of like moss and vines or flowers or whatever, nature reclaiming them. That would have been more impactful than just having them come back alive for whatever reason. At least give a good reason of how the Elder cured them, instead of just, yeah, the Elder restored us and now we're here. It completely, like I said, ruins their sacrifices. So just leave their sacrifice alone or give a better reason. Let Rosa be both devoted to Cecile while having her own goals. Possibly you could have her more connected to the crystals that Golbez is stealing, and she wants to restore the balance of the world. As opposed to just following Cecile, she can also personally want to restore order back to the world. That would give her deeper character motivations than what we got, and would actually, I feel like, add more depth to her character. Have Edward actually leave the party, also wanting to become stronger in his own way, but not in strength-wise, like he already had the scene where he, like, hey, Edward, keep fighting. Instead, let's have him go off on his own to the kingdom where the party will find him, and instead have the kingdom, or because there's like 8 sisters there or whatever, priests, have them teaching him how to run the kingdom better. Have him give him like self-doubt. So like, not only is he feel worthless about fighting, have him feel worthless. Have that lead into him not thinking he's strong enough to run a kingdom. Let him go off on his own to become stronger for his people. And then also he can still help the party eventually. And I think you only have 4 party members around there, instead of just leaving him bedridden. And then for Tella, instead of him learning Meteor, because with him learning Meteor, Rydia learns Meteor as she levels up. There's no story moment or anything. And Fusoya, whenever he joins your party, just knows Meteor. So he's learning the spell that supposedly you have to have a lot of knowledge to learn, when 2 people just have it / learn it already. Instead of Meteor, have him learn Ultima. Oh yeah. Let him learn that gigantic spell from Final Fantasy II. And then, instead of just, weakening Golbez, have Golbez have this gigantic fortress that's just terrorizing people. Have Tella use Ultima to not only blow up Golbez, but blow up that fortress, severely crippling Golbez. And that way, it doesn't feel like his sacrifice, like, oh, he was so consumed by revenge that he did nothing. Like, oh, he was so consumed by revenge, but at least he did something. Helped the story even better, aside from just not killing Golbez, freeing Kane, and just dying. At least he took out something that was hurting everybody. He helped the world and the main party in some way. Have Edge learn from his parents' death, then that whole situation would be way more serious than it actually is. So you can have him start off as this overconfident, then when his parents told him, hey, you need to take over the kingdom because we're going to die now, have him actually learn from that. And then for Cecile, just have him be more vocal or actively try people sacrificing themselves. Show on screen of him like trying to pull people away from their sacrifices or something, and then he's not strong enough, or, you know, have him do something more than he already is. Have him help people like Power him and Power him, try to exhaust all his options, trying to help them, or make him feel so torn up, or give him like some type of character reflection throughout the game. So it shows that he's more caring than he actually is, but currently he just feels like he's uncaring. And then cut out that needless drama and change it over to his speech at Baron, where Cecile has to quell the people's worries, than this super minor argument. I feel like these changes would have made a better story overall. What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments if you sat through all of that. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think these changes would have been good? Or how do you think they would have changed? Maybe you like the story. You can tell me how the story works for you. I just feel like the original writers, they were doing something different from the previous game. The previous game kind of felt, you know, I don't want to say childish, but it was really lighthearted and charming. And then they tried to do something super serious, but at the same time, not serious. Because sacrificing yourself means nothing, apparently. So, I'm not finding the story, and I'm even more torn over it than this one got a direct sequel than the others. Like, the only thing that's left to be expanded upon is Kane and some of the relationships, but I'll have to play it to see what happens. The story made me heated, annoyed, frustrated, so much so that I had to retype notes, re-record this entire video, and make it double the length. Apparently, this section, no gold coins. Zero, nada, nothing. Final thoughts. Moving on to our final thoughts. Well, it's done and over. I don't really like Final Fantasy IV, even less than 1 and 2. At least they try to be different in Final Fantasy IV with their active time battle and try more unchangeable, unique characters. But overall, the game just felt super sluggish and unimpactful. If you're gonna have a bad story, then have fun game mechanics, like Borderlands 3. Now, Final Fantasy 1 and 2 stories are nothing to hit home about, but of course, they had the limitations of the original Famicom, so they couldn't do too much. But here, the story just didn't cut it for me. Like I said, I was almost going to give up on it, but I decided to suffer through and play to the end. The reason I've disliked this game may be because of Final Fantasy III, where you have customizability over the characters and the music and the fun yet serious story. Final rating, 3 out of 5 gold coins. Would I recommend this one? Probably not. At least Final Fantasy 1 and 2 are shorter, and again, you get to see how much things change between the two, but here it's long and trivial. I'm not saying don't play it, I'm just saying there are better ones to play it first. And that's it. That is the conclusion of this episode. What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below. If you've seen it this far, thank you for watching. That must have been tough, watching through all of that. I feel like I made a lot of good points. I feel much better about this than I did the other recording. But oh man, there's going to be a lot of editing here. I hope you're ready to enjoy watching all this gameplay, because I'm not going to be able to line everything up to a T. But with that, that's all I had to say. Let's get everything said and out of the way. If you want to see the next episode, go ahead and subscribe, and guess turn on the notifications to see what I come out with next. I'm always uploading RPG, both video game and tabletop. I think you can tell by looking at my channel, but if that interests you, go ahead and subscribe. Like I said, you can become a gob. If you want more updates, I also post on the community here on YouTube, or I make posts here. But I also share my videos and post to Twitter and /X. So if you use that platform, then go ahead and follow me there using the link in the description. And of course, if you want to send me something or just want to make some goofy post or something, then I have a Reddit as well. That's also in the description. Once again, thank you if you've made it this far, or if you just skipped ahead. I know who you are. But anyways, I hope you gobs have a lop of a day, and see you in my next adventure.